All right. Okay, thanks everyone for joining. We're going to be having a conversation about mental health and race, perspectives on the past and the future of wellness. My name is Karen. I'm the social media coordinator for the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance. With us today, we have several members of the DBSA community. Robert, could you start off by introducing yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Dabney Jr. I have the privilege of leading DBSA's Peer Apprentice program. I am a peer myself. A little bit about me is joined the military at 18, served in the Army for 9 years as a combat medic. After leaving the service in 2007, I went to school to become a hospital chaplain. I did that for a few years, and that's when my PTSD and mood disorders and things caught up with me. I resigned from the hospital in 2020 and started my journey as a peer specialist. And that's a little bit about myself.
Great. Thanks, Robert. So also with us today is Angelica. Angelica, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Angelica, and I am currently a member of DBSA's Young Adult Council. Professionally, I work as a senior finance analyst for a media company, and I've been in that kind of role professionally for about 10 years now. And I'm a second generation Filipino American, and I'm really excited to be here on this webinar.
Thanks, Angelica. And with us too is Michelle. Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Michelle Bibby. I'm a person living with bipolar disorder 1 with psychotic features. I am a certified peer specialist in the state of Texas. My DBSA cred goes back probably 20 years. I started attending the DBSA Austin support group, then served as a facilitator for the DBSA chapter for many years and served as the DBSA chapter president for a number of years. I've been facilitating online support groups, DBSA online support groups on Support Group Central for about 6 years. And since April of 2021, I've had the pleasure and the honor of facilitating DBSA support groups for the Black community. I am a retired human resources manager, and I run my own mental health consulting firm. I also serve as board chair for Via Hope, which is the training and certifying entity for peer specialists in the state of Texas.
Thanks, everyone. So as we all know, July is BIPOC Mental Health Awareness Month. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. This Awareness Month was first recognized in 2008 and was originally designated as B.B. Moore Campbell's National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. This Awareness Month is a time to really bring awareness to unique challenges and barriers that historically marginalized communities have experienced when it comes to mental health conditions and mental health care. To start off, Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about what perspectives you're bringing to this conversation today?
All righty. To provide you some information, background or context about my recovery journey, I was in my first year of law school in 1985 and had my first psychotic break. I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 with psychosis, psychotic features. And I'd like to say, I think it's kind of important to note, there was no history of mental health conditions in my family. The psychiatrist who did my intake happened to be a Black female psychiatrist. And that's key because in 1985, and there's still truth to it today, if you presented with any type of psychosis, you were far more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. So that Black female psychiatrist took the time to talk to me, and I was talking in a very nonlinear manner to get the right diagnosis. And I'm very appreciative and grateful for that. I had to withdraw from law school because in 1985, doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, family members had very low expectations for a person living with bipolar disorder. In fact, my psychiatrist was very surprised that I had a college degree. He advised me that I would probably never be able to go to law school and may not be able to work. Nevertheless, I had a long, successful career in human resources management. However, there were times that bipolar disorder would show up and interrupt my ability to work. I would have to take time off from work. I had manic psychotic episodes and hospitalizations, quite a few of them, quite honestly. I had a child when I was 40 and had to go off of a medication that I had been taking for many years. And prior to coming off of that medication, which gave me a tremendous amount of stability, I had a 4-year period where my psychiatrist could not get my cocktail down correctly. And I had 4 involuntary commitments, 4 summers in a row. I ended up having to go out on Social Security disability. I like to focus on helping people in support groups acknowledge grief, because there's a lot of grief associated with the things that we have to let go of, because the mood disorder has shown up in a disruptive way in our lives. So I had the grief of not being able to finish law school, and then also the grief of not being able to work. And my entire identity was wrapped up in my career. Nevertheless, I started attending Dbsa support group meetings when I went out on Social Security disability, and that really launched my recovery journey. And I completely pivoted to the mental health realm. So I was able to work myself off of disability. I started working part-time as a certified peer specialist at a state mental health hospital. And then I got hired as a consultant for Via Hope, which is the training and certifying entity for peer specialists in the state of Texas. And then I got hired to serve as the statewide consumer coordinator for Via Hope. So it's not easy to work your way off of Social Security disability. And I'm very happy and grateful that despite having to come to terms with not being able to work anymore, I was able to pivot into the mental health realm and actually get back into the workforce doing work that I love.
Robert, I know that peer support is really central to your mental health journey. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, I'd love to. As I mentioned in my introduction, my first career was in the military, and I left the military in 2007, not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life. But one thing that did happen between 2007 and 2021, when I first was introduced to Dbsa, was that I kind of disconnected myself from any and all communities I was a part of. I'm learning, I have learned now that that is very common, a very common trajectory for veterans as they leave service. They kind of disconnect themselves from community. And that's exactly what I did. It was unintentional. The purpose was really because I didn't want to revisit some of the things in my past and the service that I had experienced. And anytime I introduced myself to a new community, they want to know about it. And so just to make that go away, I kind of went away and just became a hermit myself. And so for about 10 years, While I was going through graduate and undergraduate school, I just disconnected myself from community. And again, when I started working as a hospital chaplain in 2017, was one of my first times really going back out and presenting myself to the world. And during that time, I had some ups and downs, but I managed what I thought was fairly well. What really set me off and helped me to see that I needed more help than I thought was on the daily basis going into rooms where not only were individuals sick and hurt, but their families were grieving and crying. And that's what really kind of pushed me over the edge. Seeing so much grief, seeing so much pain on a daily basis, it continuously called out my grief and my pain and things that I hadn't addressed. And so in January 2020, I made the decision for my own mental health to leave that field, to leave the field of hospital chaplaincy and just pursue wholeness and healing for myself. And I did that. I set out on that journey on my own, not knowing really where I want to go and what I want to do. But as I began to learn about alternative therapies and ways of healing for individuals that are looking for alternative ways of healing, I ran into what was called peer support. Primarily through the VA, they had peer support specialists down every hallway, it seems sometimes. And as I learned more about peer support and peer support specialists, I discovered that the purpose of peer support specialists is to connect with individuals going through their own mental health journey on a level that isn't clinical, on a level that is more personal, that is more relatable. And as I learned about that, I saw the similarities between peer support services and chaplaincy. And so I kind of delved head first into learning more about it, trying to find a peer support specialist for myself. And in doing so, I came across Dbsa and found their classes that they offer on a consistent basis for individuals wanting to become peer support specialists. And that's really what opened the door for me. It showed me a new world, a world where I could connect with someone, not on a basis of what my diagnosis is or what my challenges are on a daily basis, but on who I am and where I started from, and really build relationships there. And from there, from that relationship, we ended up talking about more about what our diagnoses are and how that shows up in our lives. And in doing that, it made it more comfortable for me to speak about my mental health. And that is really what opened the door and helped me to become more of a advocate for someone with mental health. I now am, peer support has given me the tools to be able to talk about what I experience and sometimes still do experience on a daily basis in front of whoever. No longer a shame, no longer a stigma I carry around about it, because I know that I'm not alone on this journey. And so in 2021, I found out about the Dbsa Peer Apprentice program that was starting still, and I applied to be the manager of the program. And that's where I started working with Dbsa then in July of 2021, and have since worked for the past year in building up this program and informing others about the gospel of peer support is the way I call it. And so it's been a wonderful journey thus far. It's connected me back with community and helped me to reopen myself to the possibility of others helping me along this way and putting me in positions to be able to help people that are also in need of support.
Thanks, Robert. Angelica, can you share your story with us?
Yeah, of course. So my mental health journey currently involves living with bipolar disorder 2. I also have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, if you don't know the acronym for that. But I would say that my mental health journey started when I was a young teenager. I grew up having like pretty severe panic attacks that would just come on, and I was kind of a stressed out student all the time, just really wanting to focus on good grades, and just like the pressure that a lot of, I think, Asian Americans experience, like from their parents as far as their education goes. And so I kind of fell into that as well. And so yeah, throughout my teenage years, I experienced really severe panic attacks, and my parents didn't really know what to look for as far as what as far as mental health issues and what, I was experiencing. And sorry, I like totally blanked. Hopefully you can cut out this part and then continue. So I wasn't diagnosed with anything until I was in my early 20s, until I was out on my own, college and working. And looking back, and just thinking about my teenage years and all the times that I, struggled to get out of bed or skipped class and things like that. A lot of it, really stems from, some like depression and anxiety that I was having at the time that I just didn't really know about. I didn't really have a lot of help or education around mental health, and what to maybe even look for in myself. And so, as far as like my journey through my 20s, I was diagnosed when I was about 20 with anxiety and depression. I was still having a lot of panic attacks, and they really got worse as I started my career. When I was 20, I graduated college a little bit earlier. And as I was dealing with those things, I thought, oh, this is just, I just need to like get my life together. It's like things that I would tell myself, and was like my personal narrative at the time was, I just need to get my life together. I need more discipline in my life. Like, I just need to fix myself. Like, I thought it was a personality flaw, and that it was, bad to have to take medications, even though they were offered to me. So I did a little bit of therapy, and I did see a natural health doctor as well, which was really helpful because I was also experiencing and was also diagnosed with premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And so for women, that's, premenstrual symptoms really, really elevated. And so that was really debilitating for me once a month. And so yeah, I just really struggled through my 20s, just trying to, deal with this myself. I'm really thankful to have a partner, my husband, who's really, really helpful in kind of, keeping me, grounded, even though, it was a struggle for a while. And the thing with mental health is that, like, you can't force somebody to seek help. So he was really patient with me and just helping me understand myself, and talking me through things, and having me go through these things, on my own time, or realizing, when I wanted to seek help, while also, encouraging me and guiding me along the way. But it was really hard because I refused for a really long time, and he was really patient with me. And I think a lot of that, he was in the military as well, and kind of knew how to deal with those things, and was like more trained on, on things to look out for as far as like depression or any sort of issues like that. And so it wasn't until I was about, I think I was 29, no, 28, that I just really hit like a super low point in my life, and probably like the worst depressive episode that I had ever experienced, because it was so bad that I had to go on leave from work and take some time off, and finally went to see a psychiatrist to get diagnosed, and was then diagnosed with bipolar disorder 2 and ADHD. And so, I finally sought the help that I needed for so long. And ever since then, and, getting the right help through medications and therapy, and support, from my husband and family and friends, my life has been so much better now. And it's, amazing to finally feel like I have stability in my personal life and my professional career. and just welcomed my first child last month. So that has been really exciting. And I just can't even imagine doing that like 3 years ago prior to my diagnosis. So I'm really thankful for that diagnosis actually, because it's allowed me to live life more fully. And something that I like to say, to people when I describe how things kind of changed for me is that like it's like I see life in color now rather than just black and white. And it really feels that way. A lot of people think that it's really shameful to have a diagnosis, but really it's a blessing, because then you know how to treat yourself and how to improve your life and make things a lot better for yourself. So yeah, that's my journey.
Thanks so much, Angelica, and congrats on the baby. For a lot of people, family plays an important role to mental health. And unfortunately, talking about mental health with family members can create a lot of tension. With that being said, Angelica, can you talk a little bit about your experience navigating these stigmas when it comes to talking about your mental health journey?
Sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, my parents, didn't really know what to look for as far as like mental health conditions go. And, I am a Filipino American. My parents immigrated here in the early 1990s. My dad even before that, actually. And in Filipino culture doesn't really recognize like anxiety or depression or really any mental health condition. Um, I think part of that is just one, like medical care, in that country is at the time, I think was not as advanced as like in the US, for example. And at the same time, there's like a cultural aspect about that as well. There's not, it's a culture where, we don't like talk about our feelings that much. And a lot of these symptoms, unfortunately, from, experience and from what I've observed with other people is that a lot of these symptoms are, associated with instability or laziness, calling someone crazy, like, oh, she's just crazy, or, things like that, that is really kind of how people see it in that culture. And so, the stigma in as far as like my culture goes, and I think a lot in a lot of Asian communities as well, kind of falls along that line of thinking. So yeah, growing up, like thankfully my mom guided me as best as she could. She was as supportive as she could be with, the limited knowledge that she had. But yeah, I did deal with a lot of things silently. And so, when I was going through, you know, these issues as I was in my 20s and then through my diagnosis, it was really difficult to talk to my parents because I didn't know how to, describe these things that were happening to me. Just because culturally, this like with the stigmas and everything, it was kind of hard for people to grasp. Um, and I found that, if you have somebody that kind of knows what you're going through and can kind of like back you up a little bit and support you and almost like be a voice for you when you are having a hard time. I found that when there is such a large stigma around mental health, it kind of helps to have like that village around you to like reinforce like that these things are valid and they're happening, um, and that we just need to give that person support. um, and then as far as like in further talking to people about it and kind of like trying to break through the stigma, especially in cultures where mental health isn't like recognized as much, is that I found that like speaking um, to some of the more like scientific elements to like chemical, like chemical imbalances and things like that, and equating it to other medical issues like diabetes or high blood pressure or cholesterol, like things that are really common in Filipino culture. A lot of people are diagnosed with those things and take medications for those things. And so it kind of helps people to have a better grasp on like the gravity of what you might be dealing with mental health wise. When you equate it to other conditions that might be more visible or are kind of like something that people hear about on a daily basis and are more common. And so I found that to be kind of like an easy way to navigate some of those conversations.
Thanks, Angelica. Michelle, I know that stigma has or plays a big role in your mental health journey. Can you talk a little bit about that with us?
My personal experience with stigma in my recovery journey is it's long and evolving. When I was first diagnosed, as stated, it was back in 1985. And the stigma that existed at that point in time in society was far higher than it is right now. And I am a Black person, and the stigma in the Black community is in 1985 was higher than the broader community. So the dealing with stigma, and I want to say I have held my own self-stigma about living with bipolar disorder. It was one of the things that I felt the worst about myself for. So the self-stigma that I held combined with the stigma in my cultural community and the greater societal stigma caused me to hide my diagnosis. I never disclosed at work that I lived with a mood disorder. In my cultural community, in the Black community, I never disclosed at church. I didn't disclose in social and community organizations that I was involved in. I feel like to my disadvantage, I never disclosed in relationships. There were some members of my family who did not know for many years that I lived with bipolar disorder. And I feel like when stigma causes people with lived experience to hide their diagnosis, it stifles us because we are not able to bring all of ourselves to relationships, to individuals, that hiding your diagnosis is like hiding a part of yourself. So it took me many years, 20 plus years, before I finally made the decision that I was going to come out. And I spoke publicly at a community forum. We had a nonprofit organization called the Bipolar Foundation of Central Texas. And I was a speaker at a community forum probably 17 or 16 years ago. And I told my recovery story. And I publicly announced my diagnosis. And it was in a Black church, which within the Black community is one of the most stigmatized places and spaces. And it was scary, but at the same time, it was one of the most empowering things that I've ever done. I feel like there's tremendous power in people telling their story. And so I freed myself from that, the self-stigma that I had and the desire to hide the fact that I live with bipolar disorder. And I am now a publicly disclosing person that I live with bipolar disorder. And I understand that I'm able to, I made the decision to disclose publicly, and from a place of privilege. I work for myself. There's no one who can fire me. I'm not applying for jobs. I'm a retired human resources manager, so I'm financially stable. My risk of disclosing my diagnosis publicly is very low. And I do recognize that not everyone is able to do that. But at the same time, I feel like there's so much power in eradicating stigma when we do come out and speak publicly and say, this is my truth. I live with a mood disorder.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Robert, I know that in your work, you get to firsthand see the power of peer support and community has to help people heal. And for many generations, people have used peer support, but it wasn't always called that. Can you talk a little bit about, can you talk a little bit with us about how incorporating peer support groups into mental health care can help those who are seeking care?
Sure. I'll use myself as a example. I was first diagnosed with major depressive disorder, PTSD, and generalized anxiety in 2014. Much like Michelle and Angelica, I didn't share that information with anyone outside of my spouse. And I lived that way for 7 to 10 years, close to 10 years, I would say. And it was when I began to share this aspect of myself that I began to feel accepted into a community. And in feeling accepted into a community, I began to be more confident in who I was with my experiences tagging along with me, and no longer seeing it as a point of shame, but just a part of my story, a part of who I am. And in doing so now with DBSA and with the Peer Apprentice program, I go out into the communities of Chicago on the south and west side of Chicago and share my story about being diagnosed and living with a mental health, living in recovery from a mental health disorder. And what I have found is that people are now becoming more likely to identify with my experience. Beforehand, we didn't have words for it. We didn't really talk about it, much like Angelica mentioned in her community. There weren't many words or conversations around mood disorder and mental health, but by me going out and self-disclosing with individuals and talking about the way I've healed over the past 5 years, or healed even over the past 2 years, after starting to share this aspect of me, people now in the community are saying, hey, I've had that experience as well. Do you think it would be helpful for me to talk with someone? Do you think it would be helpful for me to become a peer myself? Would that help me in my journey? And not only that, but people are more likely to share that their brother, their cousin, their uncles are going through something, and they are afraid to talk about it. How can I get them connected with the community? How can I get them connected with the community that can help them kind of heal and thrive at the same time? And so just this aspect, this tool of self-disclosing to the community and in the world of peer support in itself is opening doors for myself and other individuals to seek healing and to receive healing.
So Angelica, you sit on the Young Adult Council, or YAC, to help young people who are living with a mood disorder. You are helping reshape priorities and resources. So what do you think what do you think is needed for the future of mental health and to address inequalities in communities?
Yeah, I think that just continuing to be open about mental health for those who are sharing their journeys is really important, in addition to providing resources. because the more people that are open about it and talking about their stories and experiences, it might encourage somebody else to do so and share with their family or friends and peers. And so I think that's a really important element of it. And as far as addressing inequities within certain communities or across certain communities, I think that creating allyship between different communities and really understanding what different nuances culturally people might be experiencing that contribute to their mental health journeys, and people just really understanding that and tailoring resources to that. I know that a lot more organizations are coming out that are specific to the Asian American community, or directories for counselors, for the Black community, Asian community, Latinx community. And so, really having more resources and more tailored organizations like that, I think will help as well, because, every community and culture kind of deals with their own thing. And so, yeah, I think that that's a really important element in the future to kind of help address those things.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thanks for sharing, Angelica. Michelle, I understand that you are working at the state level promoting peer support groups. Where is that headed? And in your personal opinion, or what is your vision for the future of mental health?
So I am a mental health advocate at the state level in Texas, and I serve as the board chair for Via Hope, and we have trained certified peer specialists, and there's another part of the Via Hope organization that is working to transform the public mental health system in the state of Texas towards a recovery orientation. So through both sides of the organization, we're training people with lived experience to become peer specialists. That's providing job opportunities for people with lived experience. And then on the clinical side, we are training mental health clinicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers that work at state Texas mental health hospitals and also local mental health authorities in the state of Texas to be more recovery oriented in the mental health care and services that they provide to people with lived experience. We have also provided training and technical consultation to state hospitals and local mental health authorities as they have hired their first certified peer specialists and integrated those peer specialists in their clinical teams. So the mental health advocates in the state of Texas, 2 legislative sessions ago, advocated for Medicaid reimbursement for peer specialists who are primarily working in state hospitals as well as local mental health authorities. The bill did pass, and so we now have peer services is a billable service under the Texas Medicaid plan. That will incentivize financially state hospitals and local mental health authorities to hire more peer specialists because they can bill Medicaid now for those services. So I think on the horizon, mental health advocates in the state of Texas, we are looking at opportunities for expansion of peer services. I'm a strong advocate for peer support. I believe in the power of peer support. Peer support is grounded in mutuality, which means there's no power differential between me providing peer support and my peers there's nothing more authentic than the connections that are made between people with lived experience in peer support settings. And so some of the things that we know about peer support is that peer support is cost effective. Peer support is an evidence-based practice. And when you augment traditional mental health services with peer support, research has shown that people's mental well-being dramatically improves. So Texas mental health advocates, we are looking for opportunities for expansion of peer support in the state of Texas outside of state mental health hospitals and local mental health authorities. So Via Hope has some grants, and we are providing peer support in diversion courts. We're providing some reentry peer support training in conjunction with our Department of Criminal Justice. My personal hope and goal is that we can start targeting public hospitals as well as managed care organizations to hire peer specialists and incorporate peer support in their treatment array. So the more we can expand peer support, the more jobs that are created for people with lived experience, and most importantly, the more people with lived experience will receive peer support in traditional mental health clinical settings.
Thanks so much for sharing, Michelle. Robert, what do you think is the future of peer support apprentices, and what long-term goals do you have for the future of the program?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I see lots of healing coming to individuals where they're peer support specialists. So our peer apprentice program is entering its second cohort. We have our program is 1 year long now, and starting this month, July, we will begin to introduce our second cohort. And what we want to do with the program is just continue to grow it, continue to create opportunities for people from BIPOC communities to become peer support specialists. Because the more of us there are, the more opportunities there'll be for our communities to receive healing, to get the information that's necessary to get connected with mental health resources that wasn't previously introduced to our communities. And so through the Dbsa Peer Apprentice Program, my role is to go into the South and the West Side of Chicago and introduce this program to all individuals, especially those that have already begun to receive care for mental health services, and invite them to be a part of the program. So what we really would like to do over the coming years is to expand this program outside of Illinois, to spread it across as many states as we can, primarily for the purpose of increasing the workforce of peer support specialists. As many people may know or have already found out, the 988 line is going to be rolled out across the US in July of this year. And what that is a line where individuals that are going through a mental health challenge or a mental health crisis can call 988 instead of 911, and will receive the help of a mobile crisis team. We are advocating on a state, federal level to ensure peer support specialists are a part of that team. The behavioral health community centers that are opening up around Chicago, at least, but I know they're opening up all across the states, the US. We are advocating for a peer support specialist to be placed there, primarily because that's where individuals from the community will come in, and we want the peer support specialist to be one of the first people they meet. Why? So they don't become afraid of the clinicians. They don't become afraid of the medications that may be prescribed to them. Peer support specialist has a special place in an individual's journey to be their compatriot, their friend, their buddy on the journey to receiving mental health treatment. And so we are doing all we can to increase this program here in Chicago to help more individuals learn about peer support and the work of peer support specialists, and working on the local and the federal level to ensure the funds, as Michelle mentioned in Texas, the funds are available to hire peer support specialists in the local facilities so that the opportunities for healing will be there for individuals from the Black and Brown communities.
Great, thanks, Robert. DBSA has extended peer support groups to the Black community. Robert, how are people responding to that?
So far, so good. What I have seen is an increase in curiosity. People aren't just coming out and saying, "Oh yes, I need this," but they're asking questions, and with those questions, they develop into conversations, and those conversations develop into relationships. And the peer support specialists in our program begin to be able to do exactly what it is they are trained to do, and that's walk people from a state of shame and allowing stigma to keep them in the closet to coming out and saying, I could use the assistance of a peer support specialist. And so in our program, our peer support specialists have begun to work on the DBSA support groups. And in those support groups, they're able to conversate with people all across the nation to let them know about what it is they do and how they offer service. And so people are just becoming more curious about peer support specialists, especially as they recognize a need to seek either treatment for themselves or for someone they love. Peer support specialist is a entry door, if you will, into the mental health treatment. Peer support specialists are a entry door into the treatment for mental health disorders, and more people are beginning to learn about this and become curious about this. And my hope is that they'll not only continue in this state of curiosity, but they will begin to seek treatment for themselves.
That's awesome, Robert. Thank you for sharing. Michelle, you are also involved in these programs. Or in peer support, can you discuss your experience a little bit?
My involvement in DBSA support groups for the Black community goes back to April of 2021. DBSA launched the support groups for the Black community. I'm proud to say that I was one of the DBSA support group facilitators who strongly advocated for the creation of these groups. I've been facilitating DBSA online support groups for Support Group Central for 6 years now. And I like to call those the regular DBSA support groups. There was a very low participation rate among people from the Black community. During the civil unrest that occurred in this country after the George Floyd murder, Black people would come to DBSA online support groups in extreme racial distress, and they would share some things, and their non-Black peers would be absolutely quiet. So there would be no validation of what they were experiencing and no support. And so what I observed time after time is that those Black participants would never come back. So my personal view is that peer support is based on shared lived experience. DBSA participants all have shared lived experience with mood disorders. But the more shared lived experience aligns, it enriches the depth and the quality of the peer support. So on the DBSA Black community support groups, we all have shared lived experience with mood disorders, And we are at the intersection as well of living while Black in America. And that makes those DBSA Black community support groups so unique and so special. And as a facilitator, it is my honor to hold sacred that space for Black people to come and share their most vulnerable thoughts and feelings, as well as experiences that they have with racism and just racial trauma that we experience based on police shootings and all types of mistreatment that occur to Black people with great frequency.
To all our panelists, we appreciate your time, your vulnerability, and the perspectives you brought to this discussion. Thank you.